Hello, everybody, and a very good morning to you. My name's Don Arliff, and you're watching World News, coming to you live from Warsaw. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, is in Kyiv on Monday to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. As Russia continues to attack Ukraine's energy infrastructure, a spokesperson for the EU official told TVP World that the talks will touch on shoring up Ukraine's power supplies. Now we're joined live by our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins in Brussels. Good morning, Angela. So what else do we know about this trip?
Good morning, Don. So it came as a little bit of a surprise, as usually the case when EU officials go to the war-torn country. We did receive confirmation from a spokesperson for the High Representative, Kaja Kallas, that she was in Kyiv today to meet with Zelenskyy as well as her counterpart, that is the Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, to talk about financial and military support, Ukraine's energy infrastructure, as well as going after Russian President Vladimir Putin for war crimes. Now, this meeting has not been confirmed yet by Zelenskyy. That is the Ukrainian president's official website. Nothing on there regarding these talks so far, but we are expecting a press conference later today. Again, the timing is under wraps due to security issues, but we're hoping to hear some good news coming out of these talks. It comes after that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy spoke with US President Donald Trump over the weekend, in which he called on his allies to continue putting pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin in the form of tariffs and sanctions. We know that the EU ministers are expected to approve the 19th sanctions package against Russia anytime now, targeting gas supplies. Sybiha also stated on Sunday that he feared that Moscow was using the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant that is in the occupied Russian territory. He stated that the Kremlin could be circumventing that energy supply away from Ukraine into Russia. This brings a lot of fears to Ukrainians as they edge towards winter time. So hopefully at this press conference today, we'll hear some good news for Ukraine as they inch towards those colder temperatures.
Angela Skujins reporting from Brussels. Thank you. Overnight, U.S. President Donald Trump signaled that he may warn Vladimir Putin in a phone call that he will sell Tomahawk missiles to Kyiv if the war in Ukraine is not settled. Trump made the comments while flying to Israel on board Air Force One after having a phone call with the Ukrainian president earlier on Sunday.
I might talk to him. I might say, look, if this war's not going to get settled, I'm going to send them Tomahawks. I may say that. The Tomahawk is an incredible weapon, very offensive weapon. And honestly, Russia does not need that. They don't need that. Yeah, I might tell them that if the war is not settled, that we may very well do it. We may not, but we may do it. I think it's appropriate to bring up. Yeah, I want to see the war settled.
Earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy told Fox News that Kyiv would not use U.S.-made Tomahawk missiles to target civilians in Russia. He emphasized that any such weapons, if approved by Washington, would be used solely against military targets. Zelenskyy confirmed that energy talks are still ongoing and said that both sides are preparing for further dialogue. However, the Kremlin expressed concern over the potential for the missiles to be supplied to Ukraine as a result of the talks, saying that it could lead to military escalation. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Sunday signed a decree loosening restrictions on fuel subsidies for domestic refiners. The news comes as Ukraine continues to strike Russian refineries with drones and missiles, disrupting the country's fuel production.
The changes allow refineries to keep receiving government subsidies, even if wholesale prices climb above 10% of the threshold price of gasoline and 20% for diesel. In 2024, Russia spent an equivalent of $22 billion in fuel subsidies. However, these payouts dropped to $8 billion in 2025. The decline came at the same time as Ukraine intensified attacks on Russian oil infrastructure. Since August, the strikes have damaged multiple refineries, cutting down crude processing and triggering a rise in fuel prices across Russia.
Early results in local elections in Kosovo show that most major cities are likely heading towards a second round of voting. The runoffs between the top two contenders are scheduled for November 9th.
In Pristina, the race is led by the incumbent mayor from the Democratic League of Kosovo, Perperim Rama. In the runoffs, he will face his rival from the Vetevendosje party, Hajrula Ceku. Meanwhile, in South Mitrovica, the Democratic Party of Kosovo candidate, Arjen Tahiri, leads the race against the current agriculture minister from the Vetevendosje party, Faton Peci. The Democratic Party of Kosovo also looks to secure a solid first-round victory in Ferizaj, where Agim Aliu is in the lead with over 56% of the votes. At the same time, the Srpska Lista, backed by the Serbian government, leads in most of the Serb-majority municipalities, including 4 in the northern Kosovo, which for the previous 2 years have been run by Albanian mayors.
In an interview with TVP World, Ivana Stradner from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy said that local elections in Kosovo are important not only domestically, but also geopolitically. She also stressed that the Kremlin's disinformation efforts did not sway Moldova's parliamentary election, and Moscow can't be allowed to influence votes in Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Right now, as Putin is negotiating on Ukraine, he needs to distract the West with more tensions. The good news is he didn't succeed in Moldova, and we have to make sure that he's not going to succeed as a next flashpoint in the Western Balkans, both in Kosovo, given that NATO peacekeepers are stationed there, and also in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So these elections are not only important in terms of domestic issues in Kosovo, but they are geopolitically very important.
7 of the 20 hostages set to be released by Hamas today have already returned to Israel. The hostages have been held in captivity by the terrorist organization for over 2 years. We are now looking at live footage in Israel, waiting in the Knesset for U.S. President Donald Trump to address the Israeli parliament. Now, the Israelis across the country gathered in the streets and squares to await the return of the remaining hostages today, with the main event taking place in Tel Aviv. The release is part of a Gaza ceasefire agreement brokered by the United States. The hostages were taken during the October 7th attacks in 2023, when Hamas militants entered the Israeli territory from Gaza Strip and killed around 1,200 people. Now, in return for the hostages, Israel has agreed to release nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners who are set to return to their homes on Monday. And of course, we're looking at live footage here of live images of U.S. President Donald Trump making his way there to the parliament, to the Knesset. We see Prime Minister Netanyahu there with his wife at his side, shaking hands with President Trump. Now, Trump is also set to meet with some, if not all, of the released hostages later on today, after his address in Parliament and his trip in Israel wraps up. He will then travel on to Egypt, where he will take place in a peace conference there. However, the participation of the Palestinians and the Israelis will not be held in Egypt. This will be with other countries from the Middle East, and I believe French President Emmanuel Macron will also be at that meeting there in Egypt.
And please here.
A fire broke out late Sunday at a mall in the Polish city of Poznan. Local authorities warned of possible traffic disruptions in the area, but said that there were no casualties and that no one was inside the mall when the blaze erupted. A spokesman for the State Fire Service in Poznan said that the fire began just after 11 p.m. local time. 28 fire crews were involved in the operation and battled the fire from outside the building. Firefighters said it was harder than expected to contain the blaze, which was burning in the inside layers of the mall's roof. Officials said the teams managed to save a large part of the building and that while it was still too dangerous to enter, there are no signs of fire inside the shopping center. Firefighters have put out a blaze that ripped through a historic monastery in northern Italy. No injuries were reported. Fire broke out at the Bernaga Monastery in Perego in Italy's Lecco province on Sunday and was extinguished later that same day. The 21 hermit nuns who lived inside the convent were immediately evacuated. The cause of the fire remains unknown and is under investigation. A cleanup and recovery operation by both firefighters and volunteers is currently underway. On Sunday, French President Emmanuel Macron announced a newly appointed Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu's cabinet, with most posts remaining unchanged from the previous attempt at forming a government. Lecornu, who his first proposed cabinet lasted just 14 hours, pledged to deliver a team of, quote, renewal and diversity.
Roland Lescure, a close ally of the French president, was appointed as the finance minister. His main task remains the same, formally presenting a budget in the coming days, which faces strong opposition in the French parliament. The most noticeable change came in the Interior Ministry, where Laurent Nunez, the head of the Paris police, replaced Bruno Retailleau. Meanwhile, the post of defense minister has been handed over to veteran center-right politician Catherine Vautrin. Vautrin previously served as the labor minister in the government of François Bayrou and as a minister to President Jacques Chirac. Upon hearing the news, the far-left France Unbowed Party and the far-right National Rally said they will file a motion of no confidence on Monday.
Monday is the final day of the 71st annual session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. Nearly 300 parliamentarians gathered in Slovenia's capital, Ljubljana, to discuss security challenges, including the war in Ukraine. Our correspondent, Zuzana Jurek, has this report.
On Monday, the plenary session of the annual Parliamentary Assembly of the NATO alliance is due to take place, with multiple speeches expected throughout the day. This includes the speech from Secretary General of the NATO alliance, Mark Rutte, as well as a video call appearance from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The plenary session on Monday serves as a culmination of 2 days of meetings by different committees, focused committees, including defense, security, economics and politics, who aim to present their reports on the most pressing issues and how to address these currently facing the NATO alliance, from hybrid threats to capability gaps when it comes to air defences, as well as potential issues of EU accession, all of which were discussed over the weekend, and now the Parliamentary Assembly is expected to present their recommendations on how to address them. From Ljubljana for TVP World, Zuzana Jurek.
And that concludes this edition of World News. Thanks for joining us and stay with us for more here on TVP World.